My husband of 15 years just confessed he never actually divorced his first wife and has been maintaining 2 complete families in different cities, with 6 children between us. So I don't even know how to start this without sounding completely unhinged. My hands are still shaking typing this and my kids are in the next room watching a movie because I genuinely don't know how to tell them that the man they call dad has been living a double life for years. I've been married to my husband Daniel for 15 years. We have 3 kids together. And 2 nights ago he sat me down at our kitchen table and told me he never actually divorced his first wife, that she's still legally his wife, and that for the last 10 years he's been maintaining 2 complete families in 2 different cities with 6 children between us. I'm 39 and Daniel is 42. We live just outside Kansas City on the Kansas side. I work as a school counselor at a middle school and he works in sales for a medical supply company, or at least that's what I thought his job was. We met when I was 23 and he was 26. I was working reception at a community health clinic and he came in as a rep, charming in that slightly dorky way. We dated for about a year and a half, got married in a small church ceremony with maybe 80 people, had our first child the next year, the whole normal life script. From the beginning Daniel's job involved travel, not constant, but he'd do 2 or 3 overnight trips a month to visit clients, mostly within a 4 to 5 hour driving radius, Wichita, Omaha, Tulsa, sometimes St. Louis. It never felt weird because people in his line of work really do that. He'd leave early in the morning, sometimes drive, sometimes fly, send me a text when he got to the hotel, call before bed, then be back the next night or the one after. We built our routines around it. I handled most of the kid stuff when he was gone. He'd do more when he was home. We have 3 kids together, 14, 11, and 7. I'm not going to share their names obviously, but they're good kids. Normal amount of chaos, soccer, band, school projects, meltdowns over homework. Daniel has always been a hands-on dad when he's here. School concerts, coaching rec soccer, making pancakes on Saturdays. That's part of what's messing with my head so much. There wasn't this obvious checked-out behavior. If anything, he overcompensated when he was home, which I can see now as guilt, but at the time I just thought he was being present. There were things over the years that I clocked as odd but explainable. He was very particular about his phone privacy, not in a shady hiding way exactly, more like he'd get jumpy if the kids picked it up. He always said it was because of confidential client information. He'd sometimes have these stretches where his travel schedule seemed a little too regular, like every other weekend he'd be in Wichita, which is only a 3-hour drive, for if you stop. I remember asking once why they needed him that often and he gave me some spiel about a big hospital contract and relationship building. There were also weird gaps in his extended family story. I met his mom once, at our wedding. She lives in another state and they're not close, according to him. His dad died when he was a teenager. He has no siblings. He never really took me or the kids to see any extended relatives. I always thought that was sad but not suspicious. Some families are just fractured. Mine isn't super close either. My parents live about an hour away and they visit every couple months. I got so wrapped up in our little family unit that I stopped thinking about the wider picture. The first real crack showed up about a month ago. Our 14-year-old, I'll call him A, asked if he could borrow Daniel's old laptop for a school project because his Chromebook from school was acting up. Daniel said sure and dug it out of the hall closet. It's one of those older ones he used to travel with, supposedly wiped. It was using it at the dining room table when he called me over and said, "Mom, this calendar is weird." I came over and saw an old calendar app open, still synced to some account, with events labeled things like L's recital, parent-teacher conference, K's dentist, on dates that made 0 sense for our family. We don't have a kid whose name starts with L or K, at least not in our house. At first I thought maybe it was from before we had kids, but the dates were from the last 5 to 7 years. I thought it was funny and started joking that Dad had a secret family in Wichita. I left because that's what you do when your kid makes a wild joke, but there was this cold little knot in my stomach that I couldn't shake. After I went to his room I took the laptop into our bedroom and started clicking around. Most stuff really had been wiped, but the calendar was still linked to an email account that wasn't Dan's usual work or personal one. It was some generic username. When I clicked on one of the entries it showed an address in Wichita under the location field, an elementary school I'd never heard of. I googled it. Sure enough, a real school. I clicked through a few years, saw events like L's 5th birthday, K's kindergarten orientation, Jay's soccer game, all in that same city. I sat on our bed and I swear I could hear my own heartbeat. It still felt like maybe there was some other explanation. Maybe he'd been helping a cousin. Maybe these were notes from a long-term client. My brain was scrambling for anything that wasn't the obvious conclusion. Daniel got home from a local client dinner around 8 p.m., kissed me, asked about my day. Normal. I told him I had used the old laptop and I'd noticed the calendar. His whole face changed for half a second, then smoothed out. He said, "Oh yeah, that's from some training I did years ago. We had to mock up fake family schedules." It sounded like something a person might say, but my gut was screaming, I didn't push that night. I wish I had, but I know myself. I seethe quietly and then explode. Over the next couple of weeks I started paying more attention. I made a note of his travel cities on my phone. I noticed that Wichita came up a lot more than any other place, almost like every other weekend. Sometimes he'd drive down Friday afternoon for meetings and come back late Sunday afternoon, which never totally added up, but I was in the thick of kid logistics and grading papers and I let it slide because the alternative was too big to look at. 2 weeks ago I did something I've never done in 15 years. I went through his wallet. He'd left it on the dresser. I was looking for a receipt for something we needed for taxes and I ended up pulling out an old folded paper stuffed behind his work ID. It was a copy of a marriage certificate. Not ours. Same county we live in. Date 10 years before we got married. His name and a woman named Melissa. Different middle name than mine obviously. I knew he'd been married before. He told me early on that he had a short first marriage in his 20s that ended badly. What he'd always said was that they'd divorced a couple of years before we met. There was nothing on that paper telling me whether they'd divorced or not. It was just the license. But between that and the weird calendar my brain started putting pieces together I did not want. I called my best friend Jenna that night after the kids were asleep and told her everything. She's a paralegal and very practical. She said the only way to know for sure was to check the county records. Divorces are public. So are marriages. So the next day on my lunch break I sat in my car in the school parking lot on my phone and searched his name in our county database. I found our marriage license, 2009, no problem. I found his first marriage to Melissa, 2004, also no problem. What I did not find was any record of a dissolution for that first marriage in our county, or in the county where Melissa was listed as living at the time, or in the counties around Wichita when I expanded the search. There were just 2 marriages, 5 years apart, both still listed as active. My stomach was in my throat. I kept refreshing like a different answer would pop up. I didn't say anything for a couple more days because I honestly didn't know how to even bring it up without detonating my entire life. Then 2 nights ago, a Monday, Daniel came home from another Wichita trip. The kids were in the living room finishing homework. He asked if we could talk in the kitchen. He looked wrecked, not sick, just like he hadn't slept. He sat down, took a deep breath, and said, "I need to tell you something and it's going to destroy everything, but you deserve the truth." My heart stopped because it was like he was reading off the script I'd been writing in my head. He told me, in a very flat voice at first, that he never finalized his divorce from Melissa, that they separated, started the process, then reconciled, split again, messed around with paperwork, and somewhere in that mess he stopped going to court dates and assumed it had gone through eventually. It didn't. He admitted that when he started dating me, he knew there was a chance he was still legally married but he pushed it down, told himself it was a technicality he'd fix before it mattered. Then suddenly we were serious and then engaged and then pregnant and he didn't fix it. He said when he took the job with the medical supply company 10 years ago, right after our second child was born, he reached out to Melissa for closure because he felt guilty. They met up in Wichita, where she was living by then. One thing led to another. They slept together, then fell back into some kind of relationship. He kept saying it was complicated, like that explains 10 years of double life. Eventually he started spending more and more of his work trips at her house. She had 2 kids by then. He said the younger one might be his. He wasn't sure. They got back together properly, told the kids he was working out of town a lot, and he never told her we existed either, or at least not in any honest way. I asked him as calmly as I could how many kids we are actually talking about and he said 3 with me and 3 over there. That's how he said it, like they live on a different planet. He gave me rough ages, 13, 9, and 4, and I did the mental math and realized there was complete overlap with our kids' ages, meaning he was bouncing back and forth between birthdays, school plays, first days of school, for 2 entire sets of children. He described it like he'd built 2 separate worlds and spent the last decade trying to keep them from crashing into each other. I asked how the hell he managed logistically. He said his job really does involve travel, so he'd stack legitimate client visits near Wichita and then pad the trips. Sometimes he'd leave on a Thursday for meetings, spend Friday actually working, then Friday night through Sunday with them, drive back Sunday night. Sometimes he'd do day trips, leave at 5 a.m., get to Wichita by 9, leave at 5 p.m., home by 9 p.m. He said he kept a second car in Wichita for years, an older Honda registered in a different county, so he didn't have to rent all the time. He stayed sometimes at her house, sometimes told both of us he was in a hotel when he was actually at the other's house. I asked him if Melissa was just as in the dark as me or if she knew about us. He said she knew he had kids in Kansas City, but he'd initially framed me as an ex he co-parented with, then never corrected it. He swore he never told her we were married until recently, which does not make me feel better. He painted this picture where he was constantly lying to everyone, running on fumes, juggling schedules, and it just sounds like he was playing husband and dad in 2 cities and hoping he'd die before anyone caught him. I asked him why he was telling me now. If I hadn't found the calendar and the records, would he have ever said anything? He said Melissa had started pushing harder lately, wanting to make it official again, talking about moving, legal stuff, and he was freaking out because he knew any attempt to legally marry her again would blow everything up. He admitted he'd also gotten a notice from a lawyer in her city that she'd consulted about custody, which scared him enough that he realized the situation wasn't sustainable. That's when he said he'd gone to one therapy session. The therapist apparently told him he either came clean to everyone or walked away entirely. He decided to confess to me first because you're the one I actually built a life with. I almost laughed in his face at that. I asked him if he understood that what he'd done was not just morally disgusting but potentially criminal. Bigamy is still illegal where we live. I said, do you get that you could go to jail for this? He shrugged and said he'd looked it up and prosecutions are rare unless fraud is involved. I stared at him because I don't know what he thinks this is if not fraud. I told him I needed him to leave the house for a few days so I could think. He refused at first, said it was his house too. I told him if he didn't I'd call my dad and my brother and they'd come over. He left and went to stay at a hotel. Supposedly, I don't actually care where he went. The kids know something is wrong. Our oldest keeps asking why dad's not home and why my eyes are red all the time. I told them we're having grown-up problems and dad is staying somewhere else for a bit. I haven't said anything about other families or legal stuff because they're kids. They don't deserve to carry this. I haven't told my parents the full story yet either. My mom knows enough to know it's serious. She keeps texting asking if I want to bring the kids and stay with them for a while. I'm sitting here with a 15-year marriage that might not even be legally valid, 3 kids who love their father, a mortgage with both of our names on it, joint accounts, and somewhere 3 hours away there is another woman who probably thinks she's his real wife, with 3 more kids who call him dad. I am furious and also weirdly numb, like my brain keeps bouncing between burn his stuff in the yard and make a spreadsheet of assets and liabilities. I do this thing where I think about random memories, like our 10th anniversary trip to Branson, and imagine him leaving us the next weekend to go to a 9-year-old's birthday in Wichita, smiling in photos there too. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I know I need a lawyer. I know I need to get copies of all relevant records. I don't know whether I should contact Melissa directly or let a lawyer handle it. I don't know how much to tell my kids or when. I feel like my entire adult life has been rearranged in my head over 48 hours and I'm supposed to still make sure everyone has clean socks and gets to school on time. Update, 4 months later. It's been 4 months since that night at the kitchen table and it feels like 4 years. Everything is different and also weirdly the same. The kids still need rides. School still sends too many emails. My coffee maker still breaks every 3rd Monday, but the entire structure underneath my life has shifted. First, yes, I got a lawyer. Within a week of Daniel's confession I was sitting in a tidy office downtown trying not to cry on a stranger's desk. She specializes in family law and has apparently seen more versions of Secret Second Life than I'd like to know about. She pulled the county records herself and confirmed what I'd already found. 2 active marriages. No record of a divorce for the first one. She said our marriage is likely void on paper, meaning legally I'm more like a long-term girlfriend with joint property than a wife, which punched me in the gut even though emotionally I know what we had was real to me. We filed for legal separation first because there's not a standard divorce path here when the marriage is technically invalid. It's more like untangling a partnership, dividing assets, sorting custody. She also flagged the bigamy issue but said the DA in our area is unlikely to pursue unless Melissa or I push hard from a criminal angle. She asked me straight out if I wanted him prosecuted. I surprised myself by saying I didn't know. Part of me wants him to face actual legal consequences. Another part is terrified of what that would do to our kids if their dad ended up with a record or worse. Speaking of Melissa, yes, she knows now, not because I reached out, but because Daniel finally told her to, or she dragged it out of him, I'm not sure which. About 2 weeks after his confession to me, my lawyer got an email from another attorney in Wichita representing the other wife, asking to coordinate information because their client had only just learned of my existence and our 3 kids. I still remember reading that line, only just learned, and feeling sick, because for a second, I'd hoped maybe he'd at least been honest with her. He wasn't. A week after that email Melissa called me. I hadn't given permission for it exactly but once the attorneys got involved numbers got exchanged. I let it go to voicemail the first time. It was her voice, shaky and furious, saying she didn't want to yell. She just wanted answers. The second time I picked up, we talked for almost 2 hours while my kids were at school and hers were with their aunt, according to her. She and Daniel married when they were in their early 20s. She said they fought constantly, money, jobs, his drinking back then. He moved out multiple times. They did actually start divorce paperwork once but never followed through. Same story he'd told me but from her side it sounded less like we kept trying, and more like he bounced back and forth whenever he was lonely. She thought it was truly over when he got serious with a woman in Kansas City years ago. He told her we were Dating but made it sound casual. She figured they were done and focused on her kids. Then he came back into her life hard about 10 years ago and they slid back into old patterns. She said she knew he had kids here. He'd shown her a photo of our oldest when he was little, framed it like my ex and I co-parent. She never knew we were married. She definitely didn't know we existed as a full-on family. She kept saying if I had known, I never would have let him back in. And I believe her, because whatever else she is, she sounded genuinely devastated. She told me her kids were 13, 9, and 4. Same age as Daniel had given me. She said the 9-year-old is biologically 4. Sure, the 4-year-old probably is too. The 13-year-old calls him dad but is from a relationship she had in one of their off phases. He stepped into that role later. We didn't bond in some trauma sisterhood. It was more awkward and raw than that. We cried in parallel, traded timelines, filled in gaps, realized there were weekends he told both of us he was on a work trip in St. Louis, when in reality he was probably with one of us and lying to the other. That conversation weirdly helped, not because it made anything better, but because it confirmed that neither of us had been knowingly complicit in hurting the other. We were both lied to, for years, in overlapping ways. On the home front, Daniel moved out officially about 3 weeks after his confession. He found a small apartment about 15 minutes away. My lawyer was adamant that he not move to Wichita or try to change states while we figured out custody. From a legal standpoint that would have made everything a nightmare. We set up a temporary parenting schedule. He has the kids every other weekend and one dinner a week, supervised not by a third party but by the fact that I'm frankly not above calling the police if he tries to disappear with them. Our lawyer wrote language into the agreement that he can't take them out of state without my written permission. He is still commuting to Wichita, but a lot less. From what I can piece together, he and Melissa are also disentangling. She filed for an actual divorce now that she knows he's been bigamous. I don't know the details of their custody arrangement and I'm not sure I want to. My lawyer and hers coordinate on logistics like making sure child support calculations take all 6 kids into account so he doesn't play games with money. There's not enough of him or his paycheck to go around in any way that feels fair, but that's the bet he made. Money is a mess but not catastrophic. We refinanced the house 2 years ago, both our names on the mortgage. The plan is that I keep the house because yanking our kids out of their school and neighborhood on top of everything felt cruel. We'll likely do a buyout situation where his share of the equity gets offset by child support and retirement asset splits. None of that is final yet, but there's a basic framework. I got a second part-time job doing online counseling sessions 2 evenings a week. Not because I'll starve without it, but because I want a cushion that's mine if something goes sideways with his income or the court orders. Telling the kids has been its own level of hell. We sat them down with a family therapist 3 weeks after everything blew up. We kept it simple, told them dad had lied about some very big things, that he had another family with kids who were also their siblings, that he had broken the rules of our marriage. We did not go into legal status or bigamy or any of that. They're 14, 11, and 7. They don't need criminal law. They just need to know they didn't cause this, that we both love them, that adults sometimes screw up in huge ways. Our oldest took it the hardest. He's old enough to connect dots. He went through a period of being polite to Daniel but very cold, refused to go on his weekend at first, then agreed only if I could track his location on his phone. My middle child oscillates between anger and trying to keep the peace. My youngest mostly just misses dad being in the house full time and keeps asking why everything can't go back to normal. It kills me every time. Daniel has been doing this self-flagellation thing where he talks a lot about how much he hates himself and how he knows he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but then occasionally slips into self-pity about how he blew up his entire life, like he's the main victim. I have to keep reminding myself that his guilt is his to deal with. My job is to protect my kids and my own sanity, not to manage his feelings. I interact with him as minimally as possible. Logistics, schedules, that's it. Emotionally, I swing between white-hot rage and this flat, tired acceptance. The part of me that loved the version of him I thought I knew is grieving hard. 15 years is a long time. We had a lot of good moments that feel tainted now. But I also have these flashes of relief that I'm not living in that unknowing anymore. That I'm not sitting at home planning his birthday while he is driving down the turnpike to go tuck in 3 other kids and lie to another woman. I am not ready to even think about dating again. People keep saying, someday you'll meet someone who deserves you. And I know they mean well, but I cannot imagine trusting my own judgment anytime soon. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have sworn on everything I had that Daniel was an honest man. Flawed, sure, but fundamentally decent. I have to rebuild the part of me that believes I can tell the difference between a normal human flaw and this level of deception. That's not a hinge I can just flip. Final update, 10 months later. I didn't think I'd write another update, but enough has happened that it feels like a different phase now. Not fresh disaster, more like weird new normal. I still don't know how to package it neatly, so I'll just lay it out. Legally, things are close to done. The court accepted that our marriage is void on paper but still treated it like a long-term partnership for the sake of dividing assets and setting custody. The final orders came through last month. I keep the house. Daniel pays child support for our 3 kids based on state guidelines. The amount is not generous but it's something. He also pays support for the 3 kids in Wichita based on a separate case. My lawyer explained he basically has to split his income between 2 households now whether he likes it or not. There was talk early on about pressing criminal bigamy charges. In the end neither Melissa nor I pushed for it, partly because the DA seemed lukewarm and partly because we both worried more about stability for the kids than seeing him get a suspended sentence and a record. Maybe that sounds soft, I don't know. I had to pick my battles and the one I chose was making sure my kids had a house and a reasonably present, paying father, not a legally punished one who might lose his job and spiral further. As for the other family, yes, I have met the other kids. It was awkward and sad and also strangely normal. The therapists on both sides suggested that if we were going to tell all the children about each other, it would be better to do it in a controlled way rather than letting them find each other online at 16 and blow up their own lives. So about 2 months ago we did a carefully planned cousin visit that was actually a sibling meetup at a park halfway between our cities. My 3 and her 3, 6 kids ranging from 5 to 14, all looking at each other like they were staring at alternate universe versions of themselves. There were similarities you couldn't ignore. The way 2 of them wrinkle their noses when they laugh, the same crooked front tooth on my youngest and her middle. They played on the playground like kids do. They compared favorite shows. They all ganged up and told Daniel he sucks at Mario Kart, which was darkly funny. We didn't explain the full sibling situation that first visit, just that your dad has other kids and these are them. Labels will probably get more precise as they get older. Melissa and I met in person at that park too. We hugged awkwardly because what else do you do? Then we sat on a bench and watched our combined gene pool climb on monkey bars. There's no big friendship arc here. We're not besties. We text occasionally about logistics and kid stuff and that's it. But there's a strange comfort in knowing there's another adult out there who understands the exact flavor of betrayal I went through without me having to explain it from scratch. Daniel is trying very hard now to present as the remorseful, involved dad. He goes to therapy. He doesn't miss his weekends. He sends overly detailed emails about homework and bedtimes. It's like he flipped from hiding everything to over-reporting everything. I keep my distance emotionally. Co-parenting-wise we're functional. We use a shared calendar app. We both show up to school events and sit on opposite sides of the auditorium. We nod at each other. It's civil and cold and that's fine. Do I forgive him? No, not in the sense of it's okay now. I don't hate him in the active, all-consuming way I did in the first months. That would be exhausting. He's more like a deeply flawed relative I didn't exactly choose, tied to me forever through our kids. I can look at him now and not feel instant rage, but there's no trust and there never will be. That part of the bridge is gone, burned, the river's running through it. People sometimes ask if I regret the years I spent with him. That's a hard one. I regret that he lied, that so much of what I thought was solid was built on something rotten. But I look at my kids and there's no version of my life where I wish them away to erase him. I can hold both truths at once, that something beautiful came out of something ugly, and that the ugliness still matters. For myself, outside of mom and ex whatever, I'm slowly building a life that isn't just a reaction to what he did. I go to a yoga class on Tuesdays because my sister dragged me once and it turns out my back likes it. I started seeing a therapist just for me separate from the family one. We talk less about Daniel now and more about what I want the next 5 years to look like. I got a small raise at work. I'm thinking about doing a part-time grad program in a couple years when things settle more. My friends have been good about inviting me to stuff that has nothing to do with my drama, trivia nights, movie runs, dumb group chats about nothing. I'm not dating. I don't know when I will. It's not some principled never again. I just don't have the bandwidth to vet someone new while also helping my kids process that they have bonus siblings 3 hours away and a dad who lives in 2 court-ordered schedules. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have coffee with someone and talk about something other than this. Right now the idea of explaining my backstory on a first date makes me want to climb into a hole. If there's anything I've learned from this that might be useful to anyone else, it's that your gut is worth listening to even when your brain is throwing up flow charts of reasons it's probably fine. That and the fact that someone else's decision to lie at scale does not make you stupid for believing them. I keep having to tell myself that on repeat. I didn't miss some obvious flashing sign that said secret wife and 3 extra kids this way. I believed the person who was supposed to be honest with me. That's not a weakness. Right now my life is smaller than the one I thought I had a year ago. Fewer illusions, fewer shared plans, more Google Calendar entries colored mom only. But it's mine, it's real. If there are secrets in it, they're about surprise birthday presents and hidden snacks in the pantry, not whole other families. And for now, that feels like a decent place to start again.